He came home expecting jet lag and missed meetings. He hadn't expected to find his house converted into a hospice. Triplets, born 2 years earlier amid headlines and celebration, were now tethered to machines and doctors' timetables. A rare genetic condition had advanced faster than anyone had predicted. The specialists were kind and exact. Their verdict was a week, maybe less. Money bought him answers, but it couldn't buy time. He had flown experts in, signed forms, and filled the rooms with the quiet competence of professionals. Still, the prognosis did not change. The monitors sang their steady, heartbreaking songs, and the house moved around them like a fragile planet. A new maid arrived on a grey morning. She introduced herself without fuss and carried herself like someone for whom steady work was an old language. Her hands were honest hands, not the manicured hands he was used to seeing at social functions. She stayed after a trial week because she was needed, because the house needed someone who made ordinary things feel possible. She did small, vital things. She rearranged pillows, warmed tiny spoons, hummed songs that smelled of kitchens and rain. She fed them broth when the formula was refused. She took them out to touch sunlight when most of the house felt clinical. She read the same book until the children could recite parts back, and in the evenings she would sit on the floor and teach them to fold paper boats. He watched, at first from the distance of a man who had spent a life managing risk. The nurses were efficient, the doctors exhausted. Yet she moved like someone who had learned how to hold fragile things. The children responded to her the way children do to people who make them feel seen. The oldest girl leaned into her lap. The middle boy found courage in her laugh. The youngest, who slept the most, would quiet when she put her palm at his chest. When an alarm shrieked one night because a lead had come loose, he ran, suit sleeves flapping. He expected panic and instead found her calm, fingers precise and sure as she fixed the wire, joking to the children about a small dragon. The sound of their laughter after that, odd and raw, made something in him rearrange. They tried every medical route he could buy. He contacted clinics and labs. He signed for experimental consultations and couriered samples across oceans. Most of the help was theoretical or prohibitively speculative. The doctors, with their grave kindness, began to shift their language toward comfort care. He tried to plan, to control, but the truth was stubborn. The maid's answer to the helplessness in the house was not a miracle but presence. "Let them taste rain," she told him once, standing under a thin drizzle with 3 small faces tilted up. "Let them have days, not schedules." She taught ordinary things, to press their palms on fogged windows, to catch sun on a cupped hand, to turn a small biscuit into a treasure hunt. She made each day into a tiny celebration that the charts could not measure. He found that rhythm intoxicating and terrifying. He had believed his wealth could buy certainty. She taught him uncertainty's quiet companion, attention. As the week narrowed, the father spent nights cataloguing freckles and favorite lullabies, trying to store them like photographs in a safe. The monitor's beeps felt louder. The doctors prepared the house for what would come, speaking softly, building sentences into gentle armor. When the last breath came, it was small and ordinary, a softening of the chest, a loosened fist. He felt the world tilt and then become singularly small. Afterward, the house became a museum of small things. The maid sat on the nursery floor and began to catalogue. Socks with holes, a tiny sticker on a crib rail, the exact phrasing of a child's mispronounced word. He watched her with a strange unease. Her work was practical, but it felt like ritual. One afternoon he asked why she had stayed. He expected a simple motive. She looked at him and said, "Because I know what it's like to be told your time is limited and not be the one who decides how it's spent." She did not remain because of pay or duty. She remained because she understood the economy of attention. She showed him how to measure the children beyond protein levels and prognosis. She wrote down the songs they hummed, the way the middle boy licked his lips when thinking, the girl's habit of hiding peas under her spoon. She packed their things not to memorialize decay, but to preserve the small, ridiculous, luminous facts of their lives. He had always believed privacy and control were the last currencies of his life. Now he found a different ledger. He began to open himself, to tell close friends about the paper boats, to read the children's short list of favorite things aloud in small gatherings. He started to accept grief as a thing that could coexist with gratitude. He built a new mourning practice around smallness. He would stand by the nursery window and watch the light move across the dresser as if tracking a private sunrise. He learned, fumbling at first, how to fold the smallest socks without tearing the thread of memory. He learned the nursery toys' names not as inventory, but as characters in the quiet play of a life that had been too short. Curiosity pulled him into places he had once avoided. He visited pediatric wards and listened to parents speak in the language of urgent hope. He began to collect small rebellions, a baby who refused to eat on Tuesdays, a boy who hummed an off-key tune to soothe himself, and treated those particulars like heirlooms. The maid's past remained mostly private. Once he found a photograph of a shoreline tucked inside her apron, and, when he asked, she said only that she had known loss, and that experience had taught her the value of presence. He started a small foundation in the children's names that funded plain, human comforts, volunteers to sit with families during hard nights, music lessons for children whose rooms felt too quiet, art kits that brought color into sterile wards. It did not pretend to cure what was incurable. It aimed only to enlarge the handful of days children had with things that made them feel alive. The house's tone changed. Formal dinners were replaced with small evenings where a nurse who could play the violin might sit next to a gardener who had planted a healing patch of herbs. He began measuring his life by different assets: songs sung, time given, the number of evenings spent listening. When his old instinct to fix with money surfaced and a research project failed, he learned restraint. Money could not purchase meaning. Attention could. People noticed the change. He spoke less about expansion and more about stewardship. The maid did not seek the spotlight. When thanked in private, she would only nod. Her steady presence taught him that the most radical act could be the simple one: to pay full attention to another's last bright days. On the anniversary of the triplets' birth, he would light 3 candles in the nursery and read aloud from a small book where he'd recorded habits and tiny triumphs. These gatherings were not solemn. They were stubborn affirmations that the children's brief lives mattered in full measure. The maid would stand at the doorway, quiet, and sometimes a parent would slip in to offer thanks. She would smile and say almost nothing, because her work was not about accolades but about the daily guardrails of tenderness. Years later, when the foundation measured its impact, it was a ledger of small accumulations: extra hours of bedside reading, gardens that returned each season, music classes that made hospitals less alienating. The father defended these choices fiercely. He had learned the calculus of caring. He never ceased to miss the children, but grief, taught by the maid's example, became something he could hold, a companion, not a drowning sea. He kept the little book, its pages full of exact phrases and crooked drawings, and returned to it the way someone returns to a map. He often thought back to the night when the alarm shrieked and the maid calmed a room with nothing but her hands and a story about a small dragon. That night condensed his lessons. He could not control time, but he could choose how to inhabit it. He built a ritual around telling small stories aloud, recording the exact cadence of a giggle, preserving the way the middle boy stuck out his tongue when concentrating. Those recorded moments became a kind of currency he returned to on hard afternoons. The thing that shocked him most was the discovery that someone with no claim to his name could teach him to measure what mattered. He had assumed his wealth would insulate him from the messiest parts of life. Instead, he found himself learning from a woman who had brought ordinary tenderness into impossible days. She did not perform miracles. She performed the quiet, exact work of being present, and that was her gift. In time, grief softened into a constant companion, not pleasant, never to be wished for, but a presence he could hold without drowning. The maid lived into that new normal with him, a steady star in the household. He never stopped missing them. He never wanted to. But because he had been taught to count differently, his ledger held not merely loss but an accrual of tiny, impossible mercies.